Now that we have defined EBD, we need to connect it to how we can collect data on different types of behavior. In order to understand the behavior, we need to first collect data. In this module, I will be discussing tools one can use to collect data on behaviors. An ABC observation form is designed to be individualized for the student you will be observing based on data collected to date. Complete all information at the top of the form before the observation. Schedule the observation during the time and place identified as the most problematic at this point. The purpose of an ABC observation is to confirm the accuracy of teacher interviews, environment assessments, and any other data used to identify a summary of behavior. Identify the antecedents and outcomes that the teacher may have overlooked, verify the function of the student's behavior, and develop the most accurate statement for an intervention development. A typical observation lasts anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes and observes the same routine for at least 5 occurrences of the problem behavior to establish a pattern. During the observation using the ABC form, always start by recording the behavior first. Be as specific as possible. Write down the activity or task occurring in class. Write down the antecedent that occurs before the behavior. Write down what happened right after the behavior occurred in the consequence box. Immediately after the observation, check the boxes that correspond with the activities, antecedents, and consequence. When you are deciding on an assessment tool, you must first define the behavior. Using your ABC observation is a great way to decide which assessment tool is the most fitting for the behavior. If the behavior can be counted, you will want to use event recording, interval recording, or momentary time sampling. If you want to know how long a behavior lasts or the amount of time a behavior occurs, you will want to use latency recording or duration recording. When the behavior you are looking at can easily be counted, event recording may be the best method to use. It does not require too much effort and may not interfere with ongoing activities. A behavior can easily be counted when the behavior has a clear beginning and end so that you can easily tell when the behavior starts and when it ends, and it does not happen at such a high rate that it is hard to document. Every time you are observing the behavior, fill out the information at the top. Write down the date, write down the start and stop time, and make a tally mark every time the behavior occurs. At the end of the observation period, total the number of tally marks for the day or observation. You can also track event recording in an indirect way. You can use a wrist counter or put paper clips, pennies, or buttons in one pocket and move them to a different target pocket as each behavior occurs. At the end of the observation period, add up the number of items in the target pocket. Examples of behaviors that you can measure by counting include leaving one's seat, raising one's hand, yelling out an answer, asking to go to the bathroom, or being late to class. Interval recording or time sampling involves observing whether a behavior occurs or does not occur during a specified time period. Once the length of the observation session is identified, the time is broken down into smaller intervals that are equal in length. A stopwatch is used to keep track of the intervals. The observer calculates the percentage of intervals in which the behavior occurred. Advantages of using interval recording include being useful for high-rate behaviors that are difficult to count. This tool is useful for behaviors with no clear beginning or end. Observations can be brief, around 10 minutes, or extend longer periods of time. Once you have the data, you are able to translate to a percentage. For partial interval recording, mark if the behavior is exhibited at any time during the interval. This does require the observer's undivided attention and is useful when the behavior happens so quickly it's hard to watch. I have provided an example for you. In whole interval recording, the observer marks down whether a behavior occurs throughout the entire interval by placing an X for occurrence or O for non-occurrence. Whole interval recording means the observer is interested in the behavior that occurs during the entire interval. Examples of ongoing behaviors that can be observed using whole interval recording include writing, walking, reading, or working on a given assignment. Once the recording is complete, the observer counts the number of intervals in which the behavior was observed, and a percentage of intervals with the behavior is documented. For instance, a teacher may be interested in whether a student is on task, which has been defined as looking at the teacher while he is talking, talking to the teacher, or looking at the assignment. If the behaviors occurred through 6 of the 10 intervals, then the student engaged in the behavior of interest during 60% of the observational session. The advantage of whole interval recording method is that it provides an estimate of the duration of the behavior and provides information about whether behaviors are occurring or not occurring within an observational session. In momentary time sampling, the observer looks up and records whether a behavior occurs or does not occur at the end of the interval. A timer or watch can be used to keep track of the intervals, observe whether a behavior is occurring, and record the results on a data sheet. A major advantage of momentary time sampling recording process is that a teacher does not need to be attending to a student's behavior all the time. Momentary time sampling provides an estimate of behavior rather than the documentation of every occurrence that can be easy to implement in class. Duration recording is used to document the amount of time a student spends engaging in a behavior. A behavior that has a clear beginning and ending can be observed using a duration recording. Duration recording requires some way of measuring time. A wall clock, wristwatch, or stopwatch are all instruments that can be used to record duration. Duration recording is really useful when you are interested in how long a behavior lasts, but can also record frequency since you are writing down every episode that occurs. Use duration recording when a behavior occurs at a high rate or tends to include behaviors that are harder to measure using event recording, such as pencil tapping, working on an in-class assignment, interacting with peers, or yelling. Using partial interval recording, you look up once every 2 minutes for 20 minutes. You see the student talking to his peers during the 3rd, 8th, 9th, and 10th observations. What percent of intervals was the behavior observed? You saw the behavior occur 4 times out of the 10 times you looked at the student. This is 4 out of 10 times. This is equivalent to the behavior occurring about 40% of the intervals that you looked at the behavior for. What assessment tool would you use if you wanted to record the number of times a student got out of their seat during teacher instruction? Event recording, momentary time sampling, latency recording, duration, or interval recording? A teacher is measuring on-task behavior for a student during writing time. She sets her phone to buzz every 2 minutes. When her phone buzzes, she records whether the student is on task or not. She assumes the behavior occurred throughout the interval when calculating the student's time on task. What assessment tool is she using? Using an assessment tool, you record during a 20-minute observation period. You observe the student out of her seat for 1 minute, then 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and then 45 seconds. What assessment tool is used to record her behavior? What percentage of time did the behavior occur? You watched the student for 20 minutes. She showed the behavior 3 times. Add up the total time the behavior was displayed and determine the percentage of the total time you were watching. When you add up 1 minute, 2 minutes, and 15 seconds, and 45 seconds, the total time the behavior was observed is 4 minutes. Out of the 20 minutes you observed, place the time for the behavior over the time for the observation period. You would get the fraction of 4 over 20. If you were to reduce the fraction, that would be 1/5 of the time, which is equivalent to 20%. If a paraprofessional requests that a student begins working on an assignment and they want to know how long it takes for the student to comply with the request, what assessment tool would be used?